Welcome to Shadows at Dusk. Dusk is not the end. It's the doorway between two worlds. A place where stories slip through, quiet, cold, and true. You've entered that space now, and what follows is meant for you. Stay in the shadow. A strident summons from my mobile lanced the evening's profound stillness, jolting me upright. The clock face glowed 11:42 p.m., an ungodly hour for calls, particularly in this isolated place. Unfamiliar digits swam on the screen, local prefix, a ghost in the machine. Habit screamed voicemail, yet some contrary impulse, a flicker of unease perhaps, compelled me to accept. "Silas," I answered, striving for composure, masking the nascent irritation. Silence breathed back, thick and expectant, before a rasping whisper scraped across the line, intimate as a secret shared against my ear. "You're in my sight." Ice threaded through my veins, sharp and sudden. "Identify yourself," I snapped, the demand rougher than intended, my pulse hammering a frantic tattoo against my ribs. A chuckle echoed, utterly devoid of mirth, like stones tumbling in a dry well. "Your window, Silas. Glance outside. Offer a wave." My marrow chills. The name, my location. How? This borrowed house, a lonely sentinel perched on the town's frayed edge, while its owner roamed distant lands, offered solitude bordering on oblivion. A quarter-mile of dark fields and whispering trees yawned between me and the nearest soul. Reason warred with a dreadful curiosity, but my feet, seemingly disconnected from my will, carried me windowward nonetheless. Drawn drapes yielded only a sliver of moon-drenched lawn, silvered and still. Fingers shaking, I nudged the heavy fabric aside a fraction. Emptiness greeted me, stark and silent beneath the lunar glow. "There's nothing out there," I reported into the receiver, relief warring with a persistent, gnawing unease. "Peer deeper," the voice urged, insistent, relentless. "My gaze holds you, Silas, always." The curtain swung shut, a flimsy shield against the unseen. My thoughts skittered, a grotesque jest, surely, yet the knowledge, the chilling intimacy. "Look," I began, injecting a false, brittle steel into my tone. "Your identity, your motives, they mean nothing. This charade ends now. Call again, and the authorities will hear of it." That dry, unsettling laughter returned, crawling under my skin like something venomous. "By all means, Silas, summon them. Their search will be fruitless, their eyes blind to what matters. I remain, observing, perpetually." The connection severed abruptly, leaving only a sterile, indifferent hum against my ear. Rooted to the spot, the dead phone still pressed close, I listened to the abyss. My hands trembled as I eventually lowered the device, my mind a frantic carousel of dread and disbelief. An hour bled away in a meticulous, paranoid ritual, locks tested and retested, bolts thrown with unnecessary force, windows scrutinized until my eyes ached. The night outside remained inscrutable, offering no sign, no disturbed earth near the foundations, No unnaturally snapped twig in the skeletal trees. Nothing. Fear finally succumbed to sheer, bone-deep weariness. Sleep claimed me, but it was a shallow, fitful thing, fraught with shadows and whispers. Respite proved cruelly fleeting. The following night, punctual as doom itself, 11:42 p.m., the screen flared with the identical, haunting number. This time, silence was my only answer. It rang out, insistent, then ceased. A moment later, a notification blinked. One new voicemail. Hesitantly, thumb quivering over the icon, I accessed it. "Avoidance is futile, Silas," rasped the familiar, grating voice. "I persist. I observe. May your dreams be pleasant." I purged the message, blocked the caller, heart thudding a frantic, uneven rhythm against my ribs. Useless gestures, I knew even then. Night after night, 11:42 arrived, heralded by a new string of digits, the same disembodied presence leaching into my sanctuary. Paranoia became my constant companion, my shadow. Every creak of the old house a stealthy footfall, every flicker of light at the periphery a lurking shape. Technology offered flimsy, inadequate hope. Security cameras surveilled empty space. Motion-activated floodlights remained stubbornly dark. The thought of acquiring a dog felt laughably insufficient, a child's defense against the encroaching dark. 7 nights eroded my resolve to brittle fragments. I contacted the constabulary. Their sympathy was palpable, polite, but their power felt non-existent against this intangible siege. No tangible threat, no broken windows, no actionable evidence. Change my number, perhaps? Seek refuge elsewhere with friends? But a stubborn, illogical root held me fast. A sense of duty to this borrowed space, a defiant refusal to be hounded from this sanctuary by phantom calls and unseen eyes. So I endured. The nightly ritual persisted, a slow tightening of the screw. The 10th night. It felt different, charged, the air thick with imminence. When the inevitable call arrived precise to the minute, I snatched the phone from its cradle before the second ring. "What is it you require?" The words fractured, brittle with exhaustion and accumulated dread. A silence stretched, heavier, deeper than before. Then the rasping whisper closer somehow. "Step outside, Silas. Let us finally convene." A glacial dread seized me, locking my muscles. "Never," I stated, the word thin but meant with every fiber of my being. "No." The dry chuckle again, colder this time. "Choice is an illusion now, Silas. Emerge willingly, or I shall enter. Believe me, the former path is preferable. Disconnection, silence, absolute and profound." Indecision held me captive, a statue carved from fear. Primal urges shrieked within my skull, barricade, flee, hide. Yet a profound weariness, a desperate yearning for cessation, for any kind of resolution, gnawed deeper. Almost detached, I watched my own hand reach for the front door's lock, felt the tremor that ran up my arm as the knob turned beneath my grip. The door yielded with a soft, sighing click. Stepping onto the porch, the night air hung thick and damp, pregnant with unshed rain. my eyes strained against the gloom, scanning the familiar shapes of the yard, now rendered alien and menacing. Hello? The query escaped my lips, frail and reedy in the vast quiet, swallowed instantly by the darkness. I've come out. State your purpose. An eternity seemed to stretch in the ensuing silence, broken only by the frantic thumping in my chest. Then, detaching itself from the deepest umbra fringing the lawn, a silhouette unfolded, impossibly tall, impossibly thin. Its locomotion was disjointed, jerky, defying the natural articulation of bone and sinew. It drifted into the weak lunar wash, and my breath hitched, trapped in my throat. Not human, not remotely. Limbs like stretched tallow, impossibly long, its skull somehow malformed, its skin a pallid, unhealthy gray that seemed to drink the moonlight rather than reflect it. And the face, smooth, unbroken, a terrifying, featureless void where eyes and mouth and nose should reside. A scream built within me, a physical pressure, but it found no egress. My limbs were stone, my will paralyzed. The entity glided closer, its gait acquiring a chilling, unnatural fluidity as it approached, halting just below the porch steps. It canted its blank head, an unnervingly inquisitive gesture. Impossibly, horrifyingly, a fissure split the smooth expanse of its face, peeling open into a dark, ragged semblance of a mouth, raw and unreal. "Silas," it uttered, the voice unchanged, that same rasping scrape from the phone, now emanating from the impossible orifice. "A pleasure to make your acquaintance directly." My own voice returned, a strangled whisper dredged from the depths of terror. What manner of thing are you?" The fissure widened, stretching into a grotesque mimicry of a smile. "I am manifold, Silas, observer, custodian, an arbiter of equilibrium." Equilibrium? The words tumbled out, fear yielding fractionally to a desperate, morbid need for understanding. Why hound me like this? Why torment me? The blank head tilted again, considering. Hounding? Tormenting? No, Silas. Cultivating. You possess a rare aperture, a sensitivity to the unseen frequencies, the unheard whispers that thread through your reality. It marked you, made you receptive. My thoughts fractured, reeling from the implications. Marked me? For what purpose? Assimilation, it stated, the word starkly simple, devastatingly final. To join us, to become an observer, like myself, to witness reality unveiled, stripped of comforting illusions. I recoiled instinctively, shaking my head violently, taking a stumbling step back on the porch boards. No, I refuse this. I want none of it. Leave me be. The mouth contorted, a disturbing parody of displeasure. Regrettably, Silas, that path is now closed. Awareness once gained cannot be relinquished. You perceive me, therefore, you are irrevocably changed. It ascended the steps in a single fluid motion, elongated gray arms extending towards me like the branches of some nightmare tree. Reflex failed me. I was frozen as cold, dry fingers brushed against my temples. A shock, not electric but psychic, detonated within the core of my being. Reality fractured and reformed in an instant. Hues bled into impossible, vibrating saturation. Shadows deepened into living voids, teeming with unseen movement. Sounds rushed in, a tidal wave of sensory data, the sigh of wind through grass continents away, the frantic, tiny pulse of unseen forest creatures, the grinding of tectonic plates deep beneath the earth. Vision expanded, peeling back the mundane skin of the world to reveal the intricate, terrifying, luminous lattice of existence beneath. It was sublime. It was agony. It was utterly unbearable. A raw scream tore from my lungs, echoing not just in the night air, but into dimensions previously unimagined, unknown. The entity, the observer, steadied me, its touch an unexpected grounding anchor in the sensory maelstrom. Patience, Silas. The rasping voice gentled, improbably, impossibly calming. The initial surge is overwhelming. Equilibrium will come. You will learn to navigate. Gradually, agonizingly, the psychic tide receded, leaving behind a shore of utterly altered perception. I regarded the observer anew, no longer seeing a mere monster, but a complex confluence of ancient thought and strange, potent energy. The terror remained, but it was now mingled with a profound, disorienting awe. What awaits me now? My own voice sounded alien, resonant with newfound frequencies I hadn't known it possessed. The observer's form seemed to pulse, a subtle vibration that I understood somehow as affirmation, perhaps even satisfaction. Now, Silas, you acclimate, you learn, you observe, and eventually, when the time is right, you will select another. The weight of that final pronouncement settled upon me. Fear, awe, loss, anticipation, regret, wonder, a dizzying vortex of sensation and emotion. Yet beneath it all, surfacing like a deep-sea current, was a nascent, undeniable sense of belonging, of destiny recognized, however terrifying. I drew a breath, tasting the fundamentally altered air, seeing the interwoven threads of existence shimmer around me. I am prepared, I stated, surprised at the quiet conviction in the words. The observer inclined its featureless head, extending a long-fingered gray hand. Then let the vigil commence. Taking its grasp felt like stepping off a precipice into the void. The severance from my former life, my former self, was absolute, instantaneous. A vast, perilous, wondrous, and utterly alien existence unfurled before my newly opened senses. And somewhere, perhaps near, perhaps impossibly far across the unseen web of the world, a telephone shrilled its insistent summons, awaiting an answer from a soul newly attuned, newly awakened. My vespertine circuits, those solitary journeys on foot, had always felt inviolable, a haven carved from the day's clamor. Or so I believed, until the familiar path began to fray at the edges of comfort. The route, a loop embracing the neighborhood's slumbering edges, inevitably led past the skeletal remains of the old Loomis mill. Long defunct, it hulked in profound silence, encircled by a decaying fence crowned with rust-wept barbs. Its windows gaped like vacant eyes, some shattered, others boarded blind. Within its walls, darkness reigned absolute. The streetlights flanking this particular stretch were asthmatic things, flickering weakly or surrendered entirely to the gloom, swallowing the pavement mere paces ahead. Yet this very obscurity, this hushed isolation, free from the jostle of others and the drone of traffic, had once been the rutten's chief solace, a space to unburden the mind. Until the haunting began. It started subtly one evening, a dissonant note in the familiar rhythm. The air felt charged, prickling with an awareness that I was no longer solitary. My own breath, a steady metronome, my footfalls striking the asphalt, these were the customary sounds. But beneath them, almost subliminal, whispered the phantom cadence of other steps, trailing mine. Faint, elusive, perhaps a trick of acoustics or weary nerves. Yet a visceral chill traced my spine. I fought the instinct, attributing the sound to echoes ricocheting off the derelict facade or the distant thrum of an engine blocks away. But the sensations intensified, a palpable gaze pressing between my shoulder blades. Tension coiled in my neck, my jaw set hard. A leaden weight settled low in my gut. Abruptly, I halted, pivoting sharply. The street lay deserted under the sputtering lamps. Nothing stirred. The chain-link perimeter of the mill stood sentinel, unchanged, its rusted filigree stark against the shadows. No movement flickered in the deep pockets of darkness. My heart hammered a frantic beat against my ribs. My breath hitched. After a long moment suspended in that charged silence, a self-conscious chuckle escaped me. Absurd. I shook my head, dismissing the phantom, and pushed onward. The rest of the run passed without incident, the unease dissolving into foolishness by the time I reached my door. 2 nights hence, the same path beckoned. As I rounded the corner onto the mill's shadowed lane, the disquiet returned, amplified. My pulse leapt, a startled bird in my chest. The cracked pavement beneath my feet, strewn with the usual urban detritus, seemed to amplify my own steps. Yet again I sensed, no, heard, that spectral accompaniment. It shadowed my pace, fading to nothing the instant I slackened my stride. Several times I spun around, heart stuttering. Each time the vista was empty, steeped in an unnerving stillness. A knot formed in my throat. Despite the mild night air, an icy finger traced my nape. Perspiration slicked my palms. I scrubbed them against my shorts, accelerating, desperate now to put that oppressive stretch of road behind me. The following day, the mill's gaunt silhouette haunted my waking thoughts, superimposing itself over spreadsheets and conversations. Was I merely weaving anxieties from thin air, or did some genuine anomaly lurk there? That evening, propelled by a stubborn refusal to yield to fear, I took the familiar route once more. Yet the moment my foot struck the pavement of that blighted block, the oppressive awareness descended again. To my right, the factory bulked against the twilight sky, its high windows like vacant sockets, fractured or sealed with rough timber, walls scarred by faded tags. No glimmer of light betrayed any presence within. I pressed on, quickening my stride, my gaze sweeping constantly, nervously. The weight of unseen eyes bore down, making my limbs feel ponderous, my breathing constricted. Compulsively, I threw glances over my shoulder. Always, the street stretched empty behind me. Several more nights passed under this invisible siege, the paranoia wearing thin. Enough. I resolved to risk a closer look. Finding a low concrete block abutting the perimeter, I scrambled atop it, peering over the rusted mesh into the factory's neglected yard. I anticipated the usual tableau of decay, splintered pallets, perhaps the corroded husks of forgotten machinery. What I saw instead sent a jolt through me, a brief, sharp flare of light from within the main structure's depths, like the quick flick of a torch or a small lantern. My breath caught, chest constricting. The place was derelict, utterly abandoned. Who could possibly be inside? My pulse thundered in my ears. A raw, unplanned shout tore from my throat. Hey! Adrenaline surged, demanding acknowledgement, an answer to the intrusion. Instantly, the light winked out. Profound silence clamped down. No scuffling footsteps, no groaning hinges, only the thrum of my own blood. Gooseflesh pebbled my arms. My knuckles ached. I realized I was gripping the fence top with white-knuckled force. After an eternity measured in heartbeats, I dropped back to the pavement, shaken, uncertain. Slowly, I retreated, resuming my run, but my thoughts spun wildly. Whoever was in there had surely heard me. Their silence was deliberate, unnerving. The following day, seeking some anchor of normalcy, I approached Silas, a security guard whose nightly patrol encompassed a small office block nearby. I found him making his rounds, his presence a small beacon of order in the encroaching dark. Casually, I inquired about the old Loomis mill, asking if he'd noticed any activity around it lately. He regarded me with mild puzzlement. That place? Locked up tight for years, he assured me. No power, no personnel, nothing. Apparently the owners had initial struggles with trespassers, but that was ancient history, more than 10 years past. Now, fortified with boards and heavy locks, it was largely ignored. Maybe vagrants slip in now and then, he conceded with a shrug, but I haven't seen hide nor hair of anyone suspicious myself. They're dead quiet over there, far as I know. I offered my thanks, retreating with a polite nod, yet his words offered no comfort. The mill didn't feel quiet, not to me. That night, I found myself hesitating at the threshold of the mill's domain. It was perhaps 9 o'clock, the air carrying a cooler edge. From a distance, I watched the hulking structure, its shattered upper windows catching faint glints of moonlight. For several minutes, I stood motionless, scrutinizing the facade. No lights flickered within, no shadows danced. A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach, urging me to turn back. I forced my legs into motion. The run began uneventfully, the crunch of my soles on the pavement, the fleeting dart of a feral cat across the road. The factory loomed beside me, a silent monolith. And then it returned, that potent, invisible pressure, the certainty of eyes fixed on my back. I stopped dead, whirling around. Only the empty, ill-lit street met my gaze. A shaky breath escaped me. A strange, tingling awareness spread through my limbs, the body's primal readiness for fight or flight. I remained frozen for a moment, scanning every shadow, every recess. Then, propelled by a surge of adrenaline, I ran faster than intended, the factory's oppressive presence clinging to my thoughts long after I'd left it behind. A few nights later, the gnawing curiosity eclipsed my fear. I resolved to breach the perimeter, not to trespass deep within, but simply to observe the yard more closely, perhaps find a vantage point through a window. This time, I came prepared, clad in dark clothing, carrying a compact torch, moving with deliberate stealth. Around 10, under a sliver of moon, I reached the fence. The area was swallowed by darkness, seemingly deserted. I traced the rusted barrier until I found it, a section near the ground where the chain link was bent awkwardly upward, suggesting a forced entry point. Heart thudding, I crouched low and slipped through the opening, scanning the shadows, praying I was unobserved. The yard was a graveyard of industrial detritus, decaying crates, lengths of corroded metal, tenacious weeds thrusting through fissures in the pavement. The air hung thick with the scent of dust and damp decay. A breeze stirred a pile of plastic sheeting nearby, creating a faint, dry rattle. I advanced cautiously, sweeping the torch beam across the ground, searching for fresh tracks or recent disturbances. Nothing. My mouth was parched, my throat constricted. Approaching the main edifice, I found the primary entrances sealed with heavy planks. A smaller side door, near what might have been a loading bay, was secured with a formidable chain and padlock, impenetrable. I pressed close to the boarded-up main doors, finding a narrow slit between planks. Peering through revealed only absolute blackness, accompanied by a stale exhalation of trapped air, old timber, perhaps mildew. Almost involuntarily, I breathed a question into the void. Hello? Anyone there? My whisper seemed unnaturally loud, swallowed by the immense, silent space. No reply came. My heart hammered against my ribs. I crept along the building's flank, seeking another access point, a ground-level breach. Near a corner, I found one, a small window, its glass long since shattered. It offered just enough space to angle my torch inside. The beam illuminated a cavernous room choked with dust-laden shelves and spectral shapes draped in sheeting, dormant machinery, perhaps. My hand trembled slightly as I swept the light, half expecting a figure to coalesce from the shadows. Holding my breath, I strained to listen past the frantic pulse in my ears. Silence reigned until a faint, intermittent scraping sound emerged from the factory's deeper recesses. Soft, furtive, like something heavy being laboriously dragged across a floor. Its source remained elusive, but the sound itself sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. A clammy chill broke out on my brow. I was paralyzed, torch beam fixed, probing the darkness through the broken pane. It revealed only static dust motes dancing in the light, the same shrouded forms, the same deep shadows. A wave of primal fear washed over me, the chilling certainty of being observed by unseen eyes lurking just beyond the light's reach. Should I call the authorities? On what grounds? A vague noise? My own illegal presence complicated everything. My pulse surged, a frantic drum against the silence. With immense effort, I pulled back from the window. I scanned the yard one last time. Stillness, no lights, no further sounds. Yet the air vibrated with occupancy, a sense of waiting. It was time to go. My limbs felt unsteady, my mind conjuring terrifying possibilities. I scrambled back through the fence opening, heart pounding a frantic tattoo. Keeping to the deepest shadows, I hurried away from the accursed place, breaking into a jog once I reached the relative safety of the main street, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, exposed even then. For the following week, I rerouted my runs, choosing busier, brightly lit avenues far from the mill's shadow. Yet each evening, back in the presumed safety of my home, my thoughts inevitably drifted back to that derelict structure. Was the light on tonight? Was someone moving within its decaying shell, engaged in purposes unknown? The unanswered questions festered. Eventually, morbid curiosity overcame caution. I decided to brave the old route once more, but earlier this time, around 8, hoping the lingering daylight might dispel the unease. The street, as ever, was deserted, though dusk still held the deepest darkness at bay. I ran at a measured pace, eyes fixed on the factory. No lights showed. No movement stirred behind the fence. Still, the familiar tension coiled in my chest, a cold fist clenching tight. I was perhaps midway along the block when a sharp clang shattered the quiet, the unmistakable sound of metal striking concrete, emanating from behind the factory fence. I froze, adrenaline flooding my system. Every instinct screamed retreat, yet an irresistible pull drew me back to the barrier. I peered into the yard, now bathed in the fading twilight, and then I saw it, a distinct silhouette near the small side door, the one I'd found chained. It was undeniably human, crouched low. My heart leapt into my throat. I opened my mouth to call out, but before any sound emerged, the figure straightened and slipped through that very door, disappearing inside. The heavy chain must have been a facade, or perhaps unlocked from within. The figure vanished with unnerving speed, leaving the yard utterly still once more. My gut churned. Raw instinct shrieked at me to flee, yet I remained fixed, grappling with the image. It was no trick of light, no animal. It was a person. A cold sweat trickled down my spine. After a long, paralyzed moment, I backed away slowly, deliberately avoiding any action that might draw notice. Confrontation was the last thing I desired. Turning, I resumed my run, my legs heavy, unresponsive. I cast repeated glances backward until the looming shape of the factory finally receded from view. That glimpse was the final straw. I haven't ventured near the yard since. I force myself now onto safer, more populated paths, telling myself it's prudence, not cowardice. Yet the urge sometimes flickers, a perverse desire to swing by, to see if the light returns, if the silhouette reappears. The memory persists, the fugitive gleam, the scraping sound from the void, the fleeting human shape swallowed by the shadows. Something resides within those walls, something that covets secrecy. Unraveling its nature feels beyond my scope, beyond my courage. I haven't alerted anyone official. A sliver of guilt remains. What if something nefarious is happening? But it's overshadowed by the visceral dread that clutches me even thinking about that place. So my runs now trace different contours through the city. Streets vibrant with traffic, pedestrians, illuminated corners. The occasional prickle of unease still visits, a fleeting glance over the shoulder, but it lacks the suffocating weight I felt on that desolate lane beside the old Loomis mill. The images remain indelible, the lack of resolution a constant hum beneath the surface. Should anyone else feel drawn to its decaying allure, I hope they possess stronger nerves than I. That oppressive tension, that sense of violation, it lingers. Perhaps the place is sealed for reasons known only to its owners, or perhaps it's merely a convenient shell for clandestine activities. Whatever truth hides within its crumbling brick, my inquiry is over. My evening runs are meant for mental clarity and escape, not a descent into fear about what secrets an abandoned building might hold. Sometimes, driving past in the full light of day, the mill appears merely derelict, a harmless relic stripped of its nighttime menace. But I know better. Darkness transforms it, awakens something within, and though I possess no tangible proof of crime or phantom, my intuition screams certainty. A presence dwells there. That gut feeling, repeated and undeniable, is why my feet will never tread that haunted pavement again. A groan from the barn, deep-throated and familiar as bone ache, shivered across the black stillness. Yet tonight, its usual lament carried a discordant note, a tremor that vibrated against the 73 years etched into my soul. Silas Thorne, that's me, 4 generations of thorns had bled and sweat into this soil, coaxing life from it through parched summers and sodden springs. I thought I'd weathered every storm this land could conjure, but the breath caught in the throat of that October night foretold something different, something utterly unforeseen. Daylight hours had unspooled predictably, tending the rows, the lowing cattle, the quiet companionship of my hound, Rusty, before settling into the shallow sleep of the old. Then midnight tolled, not from a clock, but from the heart of the darkness outside. A disturbance, a sequence of jarring sounds ripped through the quiet fabric of the farm. Dismiss it? An old man's fancy. Windy nights breed phantoms in seasoned timbers. Yes, but this possessed a cadence, a metallic insistence, emanating unmistakably from the cavernous belly of the barn. My frame, brittle with age, complained as I swung my legs over the bedside. Rusty's grizzled head lifted, ears taut, twin radars locking onto the disturbance. "Well now, old fellow," I rasped, fumbling for spectacles on the nightstand. "What mischief brews out there?" A soft thudding of his tail against the worn floorboards. His ascent. At least this vigil wouldn't be a solitary one. Boots pulled on, the heft of the maglite a cold comfort in my grip, though a flimsy shield against what precisely? Downstairs, each tread on the complaining floorboards seemed amplified. Outside, the barn's dissonant symphony intensified, metal scraping metal, a percussive thud that jolted my pulse. My hand rested on the back door latch, a threshold between familiar warmth and encroaching uncertainty. Retreat beckoned, seductive as sleep itself. But the land held me fast. This earth, these buildings, they were my charge. Stepping out, the night air wrapped cool and damp around me. A thick blanket of cloud smothered the moon, plunging the farmstead into an inkwell void. My flashlight carved a hesitant tunnel through the gloom, illuminating swirling dust motes like lost souls. Beside me, Rusty emitted a low growl, a vibration deep in his chest, the hackles along his spine ridged. "Steady now, boy," I murmured, my own heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Then, abruptly as it began, the clamor ceased. Silence descended heavy and charged, pregnant with unspoken threats. The world seemed to pause, listening. My hand, betraying me with a slight tremor, found the rough wood of the great barn door. A breath drawn deep, held, then expelled as I heaved it open. The scent of the barn, that old comforting fusion of dry hay, livestock, and earth, enveloped me. But tonight, an alien undercurrent tainted the air, sharp and unsettling. The flashlight's beam swung, painting familiar shapes, stalls, harnesses, the settled dust of ages, orderly. Except, no. The ancient Massey Ferguson, my iron workhorse, stood askew, dragged from its customary repose. Tools lay scattered beneath it out like dropped weapons, their metal surfaces catching the light. Who's in here? My voice, thin and uncertain, vanished into the vast, shadowed rafters. Silence answered, yet I sensed movement, a furtive rustle from the barn's deep recesses. Rusty whined, a low, anxious sound, pressing close against my leg. My light caught them then, impressions in the dirt floor, not my worn boot prints. These were larger, deeper, the tread sharp and unfamiliar, leading toward the towering stacks of winter hay. A trespasser, here, now. Prudence screamed retreat, urged me back toward the house, toward the telephone and the sheriff. But a stubborn filament of pride, perhaps sheer obstinacy, pulled me onward. Following the tracks, pulse hammering a frantic rhythm against my ears, Rusty a warm, trembling presence at my side. Near the hayloft's shadow, I froze. A sound, soft but distinct, the measured intake and exhalation of breath. Someone huddled there, concealed in the darkness behind the bales. Pinning the flashlight beam onto the towering wall of hay, I held my ground. "I know you're back there," I called, striving for a firmness my racing heart denied. "Show yourself. No need for hiding." A pause stretched taut, then movement. Slowly, hesitantly, a figure detached itself from the shadows. The light caught a face, young, achingly so, smudged with grime beneath a tangle of dark hair. His clothes hung loosely on a spare frame, tattered witnesses to hardship. He flinched from the beam, raising a hand like a shield. "Please," the voice was a parched whisper. "Didn't mean no harm. Just needed somewhere dry. Didn't touch nothing." I eased the flashlight down, the stark beam softening, gaunt, eyes wide with a hunted look that spoke volumes of desperation. My initial alarm began to curdle into something akin to pity. "What do they call you, son?" I asked, the gruffness gentler now. "Leo," he answered, poised for flight, muscles coiled tight. I nodded slowly, the gears of judgment grinding against the pull of empathy. He wasn't the first soul seeking refuge this old barn had sheltered over the decades, though it had been a long while. Rough winds blew across the world these days. "You hungry, Leo?" A flicker of hesitation, then a minute, almost imperceptible nod. A weariness settled deep in my bones. "All right then, up to the house with you. Kitchen's warm. We'll find you some supper, hear your story." Leo's eyes flared wide, disbelief warring with caution. "You ain't the law?" "Not yet," I replied, turning toward the door. "Give me cause, and that changes. Now come on. Night's too cold for lengthy debates out here." We walked back toward the faint yellow glow of the farmhouse windows, Rusty padding ahead, a silent escort. As Leo stepped onto the porch, into the spill of light from the kitchen, my gaze snagged on his wrist. A flash of ink beneath a frayed cuff, a jagged symbol, stark and disturbingly familiar. News reports, recent break-ins. The image clicked into place. Our eyes locked. In that instant, he knew I'd seen it, knew I recognized it. The air thickened, suddenly electric with unspoken questions, and potential consequences. A crossroads, sharp and immediate. This boy, Leo, carried the trouble like a second skin, tangled in threads I recognized as dangerous. Yet beneath the grime and fear, he was scarcely more than a child adrift. Food first, I heard myself say, the decision settling even as uncertainty lingered. I held the door open. Then you and I are going to talk, a long talk, about choices. Leo paused on the threshold, a complex mixture of relief and apprehension flickering across his features before ducking inside. The night, I knew, had only just begun its unfolding. Difficult words lay ahead, perhaps a call that couldn't be avoided. But for this moment, there was the promise of a hot meal, the sanctuary of four walls, and the fragile possibility of steering a wayward spirit. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the barn door again, its familiar groan now less a harbinger of fear, more a resonant chord echoing generations of struggle, resilience, and the quiet hope of renewal. I shut the farmhouse door, sealing out the darkness, embracing the warmth within. Tomorrow would dawn with its own demands, but tonight offered sustenance, shelter, and the space for comprehension. Sometimes, that fragile space is everything. Watching Leo devour scrambled eggs and thick-cut toast with a desperate intensity, a thought surfaced, clear and sharp. Perhaps the true trespasser tonight hadn't been the boy in the barn, but the fear that had gripped my own heart, fear of the unknown, fear of disruption, fear of the world beyond my fences. By choosing welcome over suspicion, by extending a hand instead of raising an alarm, had I not only offered this lost boy a lifeline, but also challenged the calcifying borders of my own world? Suddenly, this old farm felt less like a solitary bastion against the encroaching shadows, and more like a flickering lamp, however small, in the gloom. Rusty settled by the hearth, his steady gaze fixed on our guest. This unexpected encounter, born of discordant sounds and midnight dread, had unearthed something vital within me, a realization that the landscape of learning and living never truly ends, not even at 73. As the first pale fingers of dawn touched the eastern hills, I refilled my mug. The coffee was strong, bracing me for the difficult conversation ahead. Yet beneath the apprehension, a novel sensation stirred, a sense of alertness, of purpose, sharper than any I'd felt in years. A night that began with a barn's groan and nameless dread was culminating in the quiet, profound potential to alter a course. And what greater undertaking exists really than that? The engine's drone died, leaving a silence thick with the salt air that clung to the small coastal hostelry. Hours folded into the stiffness seizing my legs. Bleached white, the building wore its chipped paint like old scars, a single wooden shingle near the door whispering its name to the wind. Grand designs were absent from my thoughts. I craved only a room, oblivion in a waiting bed, perhaps sustenance, then the unbroken dark of a long sleep. That simple trinity was the extent of my ambition. A short ascent of steps brought me through the entrance. Within, the air hung heavy, steeped in the ghosts of salted fish and the dry breath of aged furniture. Behind a narrow counter stood the proprietor, a man whose face suggested 50 years etched by sea and indifference. His short-sleeved shirt and worn trousers spoke of routine, not welcome. No smile softened his features. He inquired after my name, the duration of my intended stay. Just one night, I offered, perhaps a second contingent on the morning's disposition. A key changed hands. A gesture indicated a constricted staircase. Questions felt superfluous. The urge to simply subside, to rest, overrode curiosity. My bag, a familiar weight, accompanied me upwards. The corridor lay hushed, bathed in the meager illumination shed by a solitary, cheap fixture overhead. My room occupied the corridor's terminus. Inside, a bed, a diminutive table supporting a lone chair, a thin drape veiling the window, and beyond a plain wooden door, a cramped bathroom. The linens, though laundered, bore the thinness of long use. Floorboards groaned their protest beneath my tread. Depositing the bag beside the bed, I nudged the window open a fraction. A slate-gray sky pressed down. Beyond a brief ribbon of sand lay jagged rocks, perpetually washed by the ocean's ceaseless murmur. Distant fishing vessels, skeletal against the horizon, were the sole signs of human endeavor. The beach itself stretched vacant, untouched. Closing the window, I surrendered to the bed's embrace. Sleep beckoned instantly, yet an insistent hollowness in my gut drew me back to my feet, back downstairs. The proprietor directed me, with another minimal gesture, towards a small alcove adjacent to the lobby, designated for dining. He presented a plate, a fillet of fish, flanked by boiled potatoes. The fish, tasted, offered sustenance but little pleasure, bland yet undeniably fresh. He retreated, leaving me to the solitude of my meal. Water washed down the simple fare. Afterwards, the ascent again, the hallway steeped in silence. My door waited at the far end. The lock clicked shut, the light extinguished. Outside, the ocean's rhythmic sigh persisted, a constant, indifferent lullaby. Weariness finally claimed me. My eyes fell closed. Hours later, darkness reigned absolute. No glance at a watch was needed. The profound stillness spoke of the night's deepest hours. An unbidden awakening, something subtle had fractured my sleep. Motionless, I strained my ears. The wind whispered faintly around the eaves. The waves maintained their steady cadence, and then another sound insinuated itself, a faint, sodden shuffling from the corridor, not loud, but distinct. The sound of bare feet on the boards, wet feet. A quiet, slapping progression, slow, deliberate, drawing nearer. I held my breath. The steps faltered, we paused fractionally near my door, then ceased altogether. Ignore it, I commanded myself. Relax. Then the door shuddered, not violently, just a tremor passing through the wood. The lock held firm, yet I felt the vibration resonate. My heart hammered against my ribs. Bolting upright, I fixed my gaze on the door, anticipating. What? Seconds stretched into silence. Then receding, the quiet, wet footfalls moved away down the hall, fading into nothingness. Slipping from the bed, I pressed my ear to the cool wood. Silence. Turning the lock, I eased the door open a mere sliver. The corridor stretched empty, the dim bulb casting long shadows. The floor appeared utterly dry. No impressions marred the wood. I drew in the air. It smelled only of dust and age. A shrug, more performative than felt, and I secured the lock once more. Unease lingered, a cold knot in my stomach, but exhaustion eventually dragged me back towards sleep. a slow, reluctant surrender. Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering around the curtain's edge. Tiredness clung to me. A crick had settled in my neck. Eyes rubbed raw, I dressed and descended. The proprietor was already present, methodically wiping the counter. I mentioned the nocturnal disturbance, the sounds in the corridor. He offered a mere shrug, suggested another guest, perhaps. Were there others? Yes, he conceded, one or two. Yet the inn retained its air of profound emptiness. I let the matter drop. The morning found me traversing the beach, past a scattering of weathered houses clinging to the shore. A small harbor sheltered a few idle fishing boats. The locals I encountered offered no greeting, their faces closed, incurious towards a stranger. Pausing near a cluster of dark rocks, I gazed out at the placid expanse of the ocean. Nothing seemed amiss. Hunger eventually turned me back towards the inn. Lunch was a solitary affair in my room, bread and cheese procured earlier. Conversation with the proprietor held no appeal. A magazine offered distraction, but the pages blurred. The afternoon bled away slowly. Departure beckoned, yet the memory of the long drive, the deep need for one more night of genuine rest, anchored me there. I would stay. Dinner was another sparse meal in the small dining area, utterly deserted save for myself. Fish again, accompanied this time by bread that seemed unnaturally hard. I ate with expedient haste and retreated to my room. The door locked, the window latch checked. The ocean's voice filled the background. Seated on the chair, I looked out towards the darkening sea. It was then I saw it. Upon the rocks, a solitary figure stood motionless, humanoid in shape, stark against the twilight. Clothed, perhaps in something too fine, too close-fitting to discern at this distance, or perhaps not at all. It faced my window squarely. The features remained indistinct, but where eyes should have been, something caught the fading light, glinting like wet pebbles. The tide was low, leaving the rocks slick and gleaming. Stillness radiated from the form. I watched, mesmerized for a long count, attention coiling in my neck, my scalp prickling with cold. Averting my gaze momentarily, scanning the empty surroundings, I looked back. The figure remained, inert, unmoving. What action could I take? Too distant for identification, too strange for dismissal. Drawing the curtain closed felt like a paltry defense. The floorboards groaned under my restless pacing. A profound disquiet settled, heavy in my gut. Sleep seemed the only escape. Perhaps profound fatigue would grant me passage through the night, undisturbed. Sleep that night was a shallow, fragile thing. After midnight, consciousness returned abruptly. The room lay silent, save for the ocean's tireless breathing. Then they returned, the wet steps in the corridor. Heavier this time, more deliberate. I sat bolt upright, listening intently as they approached, closer, stopping directly outside my door. The knob turned, rattled once, twice. A pause, then the door itself trembled, a definite pressure against the lock. Scrambling out of bed, I reached the door, my hand closing over the knob. The wood vibrated beneath my palm, a faint but insistent pushing, someone testing the barrier without committing full force. Who is there? My voice sounded thin in the silence. No reply, only the continued steady pressure. I waited, breath held captive in my chest. Then the rattling ceased. The pressure vanished. The sodden steps retreated, fading once more down the hallway's length. Unlocking the door, I flung it open, scanning left and right. Empty. The corridor lay undisturbed. No footprints, no trace of moisture. Nothing. I slammed the door shut, bolted it, and leaned back against the wood, breath coming in ragged gasps. My heart thudded violently. A film of sweat beaded on my forehead. Switching on the bedside lamp, I sank into the chair, eyes fixed on the door, waiting. Vigil stretched into hours. Sleep remained elusive, though exhaustion must have claimed me near dawn, for I woke to the weak, gray light filtering through the curtain again. Enough. The decision was instantaneous. Departure this morning. Dressing swiftly, packing my bag, I descended the stairs. The proprietor occupied his usual post in the lobby. "Check out," I stated. He posed no inquiries, merely accepted the payment. Had anyone else, I ventured, reported unusual nocturnal noises? A shrug. Indifference. Did he know if someone had attempted to enter my room? He claimed ignorance, his own eyes shadowed with weariness. Outside, bag stowed in the trunk, I turned for a final look towards the beach and saw him again, standing upon the rocks, gaze fixed in my direction. The early sun rendered him clearer now. Skin possessed a damp, grayish integument. Those eyes captured the light, like minuscule whetstones. Facial features remained blurred, indistinct. The body, lean, utterly devoid of hair or clothing, just that smooth, dark-toned skin, motionless. My hands fumbled, trembling slightly, searching pockets for the keys. Inside the car, the engine caught, shattering the quiet. A compulsion held me for a beat, staring through the windshield at the deserted street, the shuttered-looking houses. I risked a final glance towards the rocks. The figure was gone. The tide had crept higher, waves washing over the jagged formations, leaving only water and the dark crown of the largest boulder visible. I steered the car away from the town onto a narrow road whose surface had seen better days. My arms were rigid on the wheel, eyes gritty and dry. Images flickered, the wet footfalls, the door's unnerving tremor, the static figure on the rocks. A profound sense of wrongness permeated the memories. Focus on the road, I told myself. The car jolted over potholes. The engine sounded reassuringly normal. I tried to expel the thoughts, to push them back into the realm of nightmare. Miles later, a small gas station materialized, a single pump, an old man presiding over the counter within, a restroom redolent of rust. Water, purchased and drunk, did little to soothe the inner turmoil. Should I ask the old man? Inquire about strange coastal apparitions? His vacant stare as I entered dissuaded me. Not worth it. Payment made, I retreated. Back in the car, the journey resumed. The coastline scrolled past on my right, the ocean appearing intermittently, vast and indifferent. No boats disturbed its surface now. No uncanny sounds intruded, only the engine's hum and the tire's rhythm on the asphalt. A measure of calm began to seep back in. My pulse slowed. My shoulders eased fractionally. What had I truly witnessed? Attempting rationalization felt futile. A nocturnal wanderer, perhaps barefoot or waterlogged? A local eccentric observing strangers from the rocks? Wind rattling an old doorframe? Yet the tactile memory persisted, the vibration of wood under my hand, the distinct push, the glinting eyes across the water, the absolute absence of footprints, of moisture. The silence punctuated by those specific, unsettling sounds. The chill that had nothing to do with the sea air. Ultimately, explanation seemed less important than escape. Distance was the only remedy, towards a larger town, towards thicker walls and brighter lights, towards forgetting the silhouette of that form, the cadence of those steps, the sudden, terrifying animation of my door in the dead of night. The road curved inland, winding through low hills, past desolate fields and skeletal barns. My gaze remained fixed ahead. What lay behind held no further interest. The sky brightened, the sun asserting its warmth. The briny scent of the sea gradually faded. Another stop, this time a roadside diner. Coffee, a sandwich, anonymity amidst the low murmur of other patrons. My hands, I noted, were steadier. My mind, though weary, felt less besieged, so I was moving away. Back on the road, the afternoon waned. Traffic increased. Towns flickered past, populated by people absorbed in their routines, oblivious to my passage. This normalcy was a balm. Fuel sufficient, I pressed on. The events of the inn remained lodged in my thoughts, sharp-edged and unwelcome, but the urge to articulate them had vanished. To whom? And what would I say? That I heard inexplicable footsteps, saw a bizarre figure lacking discernible features. That my locked door shook in the night, yet investigation revealed nothing. The experience felt intensely private, hermetically sealed. It was concluded. I was elsewhere. That presence remained tethered to that forsaken stretch of coast. No backward glance was necessary or desired, only the forward momentum towards a place of rest, free from that specific gnawing tension, towards safety, towards closing my eyes and hearing only the mundane symphony of the world. Darkness fell again. A motel appeared near a highway junction, plain, unremarkable, infinitely preferable to the inn. The clerk processed my request with practiced disinterest. Parked, bag retrieved, I entered the room. It smelled of dust and faint disinfectant, harmlessly impersonal. Lock secured, lights blazing, I sat on the edge of the bed and listened, critically, intently. No dripping water, no footsteps, wet or otherwise, no vibrations through the door. A long, slow exhalation. Eyes closed, sleep. The desire was overwhelming. Forget. Lie down, extinguish the light, wait. Nothing stirred. Awake for a time, deliberately testing the silence, I heard only the distant rush of highway traffic, the muffled drone of a faraway television, indistinct voices from another room. Normal sounds. Pulling the blanket higher, I consciously willed my shoulders to relax. My heart rate subsided to a steady, quiet rhythm. Eventually, sleep came. The day bled into bruised twilight by the time Elias wrestled his weary car up the final rutted ascent. Exhaustion clung to him, a residue of the long drive and the mountain's demanding embrace. Nestled within a ragged clearing, choked by towering pines and uneven earth, the cabin slumped, a structure worn thin by time and neglect. Its timbers sighed under a coat of peeling paint. The wooden door, protesting with a groan of loose hinges, yielded to his push. Inside, austerity reigned. A meager cot huddled in one corner, its mattress a mere suggestion. A plain table flanked by two chairs commanded the center. Opposite, a cold hearth yawned. Small windows, veiled in dusty, ancient curtains, offered stingy glimpses of the encroaching woods. Elias let his backpack thud near the threshold, placing his lantern on the table's scarred surface. His ambition was modest: stillness, a space to untangle the knots in his mind, perhaps coax out a flicker of inspiration. He carried only a notebook, a clutch of pencils. Quietude was the sole luxury he craved. He slid the bolt home on the door, a rasp of metal in the silence, then tested the windows. They latched, albeit loosely, rattling a complaint if pressed. From his pack emerged the Spartan necessities: tins of food, water bottles, matches, a torch and its spare batteries, a folding knife. The air hung thick with the scent of aged wood and subterranean damp. Outside, the silence was profound, broken only by the occasional sigh of wind stirring the high branches. He ate cold beans straight from the tin, the metallic tang sharp on his tongue. Seated at the table, he attempted to write, but his thoughts remained stubbornly inert, heavy as river stones. Darkness seeped in, pooling in the corners, eventually swallowing the room. He ignited the lantern, its glow a fragile shield, setting it near a window to pierce the gloom beyond. Peering out, he found his vision curtailed, the pines pressed close, the space between them and impenetrable as a solid black. The restless shifting of branches rode the wind, an inconsistent rhythm. Sometimes, woven into that sound, he imagined something else, a low murmur, the ghost of a whisper. He forced his attention back to the blank page, but the rhythm eluded him. His gaze kept snapping back to the window pane. Around midnight, the whisper became undeniable, soft, brief, like words exhaled on a dying breath just outside. Elias rose, drawn to the window nearest the sound. Pressing his ear to the cool, aged glass yielded nothing distinct, no decipherable words. Heart quickening, he retrieved the torch, doused the lantern's flame, and eased the door open a crack. The beam sliced through the night, glancing off tree trunks and dew-kissed patches of grass. Wind animated the branches, conjuring a dance of fluid shadows. No one. The whispering ceased. He retreated, bolting the door once more. Hours later, it returned, closer this time. A sound too steady, too deliberate for the capricious wind. A cold fist clenched in Elias's chest. Torch in hand again, he moved to the window facing the source. Old glass, filmed with a faint interior haze. He felt sweat prickle beneath his shirt, wiped his brow, tried to muffle the sound of his own breathing. The torch beam stabbed outwards, twisted branches, humps of uneven ground, and then framed between two skeletal pines, a presence, tall, impossibly slender, with limbs that seemed unnaturally long. Its eyes caught the light, reflecting it with a strange, glassy clarity. Motionless, utterly still. The face remained indistinct, a shadowed oval crowned by those luminous eyes. Humanoid, yet fundamentally wrong. Elias's throat constricted. He held the light steady, saying nothing. After a long, stretched moment, the figure retracted, melting back into the seamless dark, gone. The remainder of the night found Elias slumped against the wall, torch clutched in one hand, the folding knife in the other. Sleep was an impossibility. He strained his ears for any recurrence, but only the vast, uncaring silence answered. Dawn arrived reluctantly, a pale dilution of the blackness filtering through the grimy windows. He rose stiffly, ventured outside. Circling the cabin, torch still necessary in the dim light, he discovered them, handprints rendered in mud upon the window panes. They weren't random smears. An unsettling geometry governed their placement, rows and circles coalescing into symbols that resonated with no known language. He touched one. The mud was dry, cracked. How could this have happened unheard? Someone, something had been here, marking the glass while he huddled within. He scanned the clearing. No footprints marred the damp earth. No snapped twigs betrayed a passage. Only the prints. He tried wiping them, but they clung stubbornly. A wet rag and vigorous scrubbing were required, and even then, faint, ghostly stains remained. Through the long day that followed, Elias wrestled with his fear, attempting to rationalize. A local prankster, perhaps? He urged himself to ignore it, to reclaim his purpose to write, but the words wouldn't come. His attention remained tethered to the windows, his gaze perpetually scanning the tree line. The thought of leaving warred with the miles already traveled, the desire not to be so easily deterred. He resolved to endure one more night. Perhaps confrontation was possible. Before the sun dipped below the jagged horizon, he gathered heavy stones, piling them near the door like crude fortifications. Windows were shut tight, latches secured. The door bolt was tested, then tested again. Hunger gnawed, but his stomach felt tight as a drum. He forced down some water, pacing the confines of the small room. As true darkness descended, he lit the lantern, placing it low on the floor near the hearth, a dim, inconspicuous glow. Then, near a window, torched dark beside him, he settled in to wait. His own breathing filled the silence. Time stretched, viscous and slow. An ache bloomed between his shoulder blades from leaning against the rough-hewn wall. Hours crawled by before the faint scratching began. Fingernails, it sounded like, dragged across wood. The noise originated from the cabin's rear wall. Elias rose, silent as smoke, and pressed his ear to the timbers. A steady, deliberate scraping, sending shivers down his spine, making him clench his teeth. He backed away, snatching up the torch. Opening the door, stepping out into the unknown dark to circle the cabin, felt like madness. He tried peering through the window, craning his neck, but the angle offered only a partial view of the back wall. After a moment's agonizing hesitation, he decided. Gripping the torch and the knife, he unbolted the door and stepped into the chill night air, his breath pluming white. Slowly, cautiously, he rounded the cabin, the torch beam painting arcs on the weathered planks. Reaching the back, he saw them, fresh scratch marks scoring the wood, not deep, but undeniable, the raw wood showing pale beneath thin, flaked edges. He swung the torch beam towards the trees. There it stood, perhaps 10 feet distant, near the clearing's edge. The eyes flared, catching the light. He saw it more clearly now, the pallid, almost luminous skin, the impossibly long, thin arms. No clothes were visible, though the profound darkness obscured details. It simply stood, observing. Elias raised the knife, his voice emerging hoarse, strained. "Who are you? What is it you want?" Silence answered him. The figure offered no sound, no reaction, before turning fluidly and stepping behind the broad trunk of a pine. Elias lurched forward, playing the light around the tree. Nothing. No rustle of departure, no receding footsteps. He swept the beam frantically across the undergrowth. Emptiness, branches, and shadows. Retreating backward, knife still held defensively, he regained the cabin's dubious sanctuary, slammed the bolt, and shoved the heavy table against the door. The rest of the night bled away incrementally. The scratching resumed after a time, now migrating to a different wall. He didn't venture out again. He remained standing, torch beam off to conserve power, knife a cold weight in his hand, simply waiting. The scraping sounds waxed and waned, sometimes circling, sometimes concentrating. Intermittently, the whispering returned, a sibilant murmur just beyond the wood, words lost to the wind or perhaps never formed. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Sweat slicked his forehead. The cabin felt like a cage, shrinking around him. He yearned to flee, to plunge into the forest, but the darkness and unknown terrain held their own terrors. Getting lost out there seemed a certainty. He would wait for morning. As the first tentative hints of dawn painted the sky gray, the sounds ceased abruptly. He waited another hour, muscles screaming from tension, before cautiously removing the table and opening the door. The clearing lay empty, washed in the flat, pre-dawn light. He circled the cabin again. More scratch marks scarred 3 walls, some deeper now, gouged into the wood. One plank bore a visible crack. He touched its rough edges, relieved it had held. He hadn't checked the windows from inside due to the barricades he planned, but now, outside, he saw them. New mud handprints, forming another intricate pattern, larger this time, dominating nearly the entire surface of one pane. The damp, earthy smell turned his stomach. Another night here was unthinkable. He packed with trembling hands, torch and knife, the last of the food and water. As soon as the light strengthened enough to reveal the path, he fled. He walked fast, casting frequent glances over his shoulder. The figure did not reappear. The forest seemed unnervingly normal, birdsong tentatively returning, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. Still, his heart pounded violently. He navigated by landmarks seared into his memory, a distinctive boulder, a fallen log, a swathe of ferns. Hours passed before the welcome sight of his car emerged from the trees. The engine turning over felt like a resurrection. He didn't draw a truly deep breath until he was miles down the main road, the mountain shrinking in his rearview mirror. Peace and inspiration had not been found in that isolated place. Something else entirely had awaited him. What it was, he didn't know, and a primal part of him recoiled from seeking answers. He knew only that he would never return. He would bury the memory, tell no one. He craved only to forget the insidious whispers, the glassy eyes reflecting his own terror, the mud-etched symbols on the glass. He longed for a sleep undisturbed by the phantom sound of nails on wood, for a silence that held no lurking presence just beyond the edge of sight. That first glimpse remains indelible, a corridor unfurling into dream, infinite. My eyes, though wide, registered no terminus, only an incomprehensible expanse. Just myself, this gallery walled by looking glasses, and a burgeoning certainty that something was profoundly amiss. A trespasser in an impossible place, with no retreat visible, the sensation clamped around my ribs instantly. My heart began a frantic drumming, a pulse I could almost hear thrumming against my eardrums. Each visitation to this dreamscape brings the same visceral clench of fear. For weeks now, this phantom passage has claimed my sleep. The overture is unchanging. I materialize some mid-hallway, a long stretch flanked by towering, frameless panes of glass that soar from the floor to a ceiling impossibly high, architecturally unsound. Cold seeps through the soles of my feet from the floor beneath, a seamless, unbroken surface like polished obsidian, offering a murky, distorted echo of my form, unlike the stark clarity of the walls. Illumination bleeds from above, sourceless, a flat white radiance bathing everything in a light that reveals all yet feels dim, lifeless. Instinctively, I seek my own image. There I am, feature for feature yet alien. A strangeness haunts the reflected face, something discordant in the eye's depth or the grim set of the mouth. A tension I don't consciously hold. I lift my arms, the simulacrum obeys in perfect time. For a heartbeat, normalcy seems possible, then the discrepancy, a blink, mine first, the reflections following a bare, chilling fraction of a second later. The mimicry falters, my equilibrium pitches, stomach tightening, breath catching. This is not how mirrors behave. Hesitantly, I advance as each footfall cracks sharply in the unnatural acoustics of the hall. Step follows step, anticipating a turn, an end, in anything, but only more corridor unspools, lined with endless reflections. Each pane captures me from a subtly different vantage. Initially, each holds but a single image. Then, a flicker at the edge of sight, a second figure in one glass, me, yet angled differently, observing. I halt, spin around. Behind me lies only the receding tunnel of mirrors, the same cold, seamless floor. Turning back to the specific pane, the anomaly is gone. Only my solitary figure stands centered, a skipped heartbeat, a shallowness in my lungs. I rub my palms together, a useless gesture against the rising chill. I press onward, placing one foot deliberately before the other. Silence reigns, save for the cadence of my steps and the ragged whisper of my own breathing. A dryness scratches my throat. Tension knots the muscles at the base of my neck. The mirrors march into infinity. Each colossal sheet stands scant inches from its neighbor, the gaps negligible. Countless iterations of myself recede into the mirrored depths, a fractal nightmare. Usually, such reflections create an illusion, but this feels terrifyingly substantial, each copy possessed of a latent presence. The fine hairs on my neck prickle, my palms grow damp. I stare fixedly ahead, searching desperately for a seam, a handle, any signifier of egress. Nothing. No interruption in the relentless glass. Peering closer, I see no wall behind them. They seem freestanding, rooted impossibly in the floor. My fingers graze one surface, smooth, frigid, unnervingly clear, as if impermeable. I test it, pressing gently, solid, unyielding. Yet a strange vibration hums into my fingertips. Abruptly, in a mirror to my left, my reflection raises its arm, palm out, a gesture of halt. My own arms hang limp at my sides. I freeze, motion suspended. My heart hammers against my ribs with painful force. The reflected arm stays aloft, its gaze locked onto mine. A faint, dry scraping sound begins, emanating from the mirror, fingernails tracing the inner surface of the glass. I watch, transfixed, as faint etches appear on the other side. I recoil, but the reflection maintains its pose, its stare unwavering. Sweat traces a cold path down my temple. My breathing grows labored. I risk a glance to the right. That reflection, too, is aberrant. It grins, a wide, unsettling curve of the lips, revealing a sliver of teeth, while my own face remains taut with fear. Its hands are splayed against the glass from within, its weight shifting as if testing the barrier, poised to emerge. Questions swarm, unanswered. How can these images act with such disquieting autonomy? My skin feels icy, fingers tingling. The urge to flee becomes overwhelming. I retreat, stumbling backward, trying to keep the rogue reflections in sight. My footsteps echo louder now, the corridor seeming to constrict. A glance over my shoulder confirms the horrifying symmetry. More mirrors, more echoes of myself. Some remain faithful mimics, others deviate unsettlingly. One cocks its head, studying me with unnerving intensity. Another's eyes narrow, appraising. The vice tightens on my chest. A full breath is impossible. Shouting seems futile. Who would hear in this desolate expanse? Swallowing is difficult. A dry click in my throat, leaving a bitter residue on my tongue. Forward again, the only direction offered. Each step lands heavier, legs dragging as if through unseen mire. Find a way out, my mind screams. I scan the mirrors compulsively. Many show me as I am, rigid and tense. Others engage in silent pantomime. Some wave languidly. Some knock, soft, dull thuds against the glass, as if seeking passage. The sounds accelerate my pace. I break into a jog, feet slapping the polished floor, the echoes multiplying. Breath tears through my throat in ragged gasps. My arms pump, sweat blooming beneath my clothes. Ahead, a variation in the relentless geometry. A corner, perhaps? Hope surges, fragile but fierce. I push harder, running now. Closer, the hope curdles. It's merely another segment of the hall, angling sharply left. Rounding the bend reveals only the familiar chilling vista. Mirror upon mirror, reflection upon reflection, exitless. A fresh wave of panic washes through my gut. My jaw clenches, fists tightening. The air here tastes metallic, cold. My breath momentarily fogs the nearest pane. I approach one mirror, pressing my palm flat against it. This time, the glass feels faintly warm. My reflection's hand meets mine, initially a perfect imitation. Then, its fingers tap against the glass from the other side. Tap, 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 audible, distinct. I snatch my hand back as if burned, stumbling. The reflection's lips part, curling slowly into a sly, knowing grin. No sound escapes it, but its eyes track my every movement. My own breathing fills the void, harsh and uneven. The urge to run returns, warring with a profound exhaustion born of ceaseless tension. My thighs burn, my back aches. Keeping my distance now, I walk the center line of the passage, gaze fixed forward, attempting to disregard the peripheral flickers of independent motion. The reflections are a dissonant chorus. Arms lift, heads turn, faces press intimately against the glass. The scraping sound resumes louder now, more insistent. A ringing fills my ears. The corridor feels suffocatingly narrow, a trap closing in. My fingers are numb, my thoughts fixated on the terrifying possibility of the glass yielding, of these others breaking free. At some point, the reflection directly before me performs an act that halts me utterly. It leans forward, pressing its forehead slowly against the mirror. Its eyes roll back into its head, breath coming in heavy, visible puffs that cloud the glass from within. My heart slams against my ribs like a trapped bird. The proximity allows me to see details, its skin paler than mine, its eyes threaded with blood. Tremors rack my body. My arms feel leaden. As I instinctively edge backward, the reflection in the pane to my left reaches out, fingers splayed, beckoning. I spin, desperate for an escape route, finding only more mirrors, more twisting perspectives. I run again, ignoring the screaming protest of my muscles. Sprinting blindly past pane after pane, the scraping sounds pursuing me like whispers. Glimpses of wild eyes, clenched teeth, distorted faces flash in my periphery. My breath comes in painful sobs, sweat blinding me. I want to scream, but my throat constricts, trapping the sound, fearing it might provoke something worse. The corridor stretches infinitely. Distance means nothing here. There is always more. The reflections grow bolder, more aggressive. Some pound the glass with closed fists. Others mash their faces against it, features distorting grotesquely under the pressure. I fear the glass will shatter. Nausea churns within me. My head feels light, detached. This must be a dream. The thought flickers, yet offers no comfort against the overwhelming sensory reality. My heart aches from the exertion, temples pounding. The air grows thick, unbreathable. I wipe my face on my sleeve, finding it already soaked. My legs are cement, but stopping feels more dangerous than continuing. Terror propels me, terror of them breaking through. Eventually spent, I slow again. Sprinting is no longer possible. I double over, hands braced on my knees, fighting for air. My lungs burn. My shirt clings, cold and wet. For a moment, silence, but for my own ragged panting. I lift my gaze to the mirror directly ahead. The reflection mirrors my posture, hunched and sweat-drenched. Then it smirks. While I remain bent, gasping, my double stands slowly upright, an air of mocking superiority in its stance. My chest constricts, teeth grind together. A surge of impotent fury rises. I lash out, smacking the mirror flat-palmed. The impact is dull, unsatisfying. The reflection merely watches, impassive, then shakes its head slowly, as if in disappointment. Anger boils over. I strike the glass again. Thud. Nothing changes. Frustration chokes me. Stop it! The shout tears from my throat, echoing down the endless passage. No response. The reflection stares, implacable. Then I notice the others flanking it. They are still now poised, expectant. My voice dies. Silence rushes back, heavy, watchful. It feels as though they are all listening, waiting. My heart resumes its frantic gallop. Waiting for what? I take a cautious step back. My reflection in the central mirror simultaneously takes a step forward. My mind reels. Breath comes in short, sharp bursts. Cold sweat beads on my forehead. The reflection presses its hand flat against the glass from the inside. I watch, horrified, as its fingers seem to curl, finding purchase on the inner surface. The glass visibly flexes outward, a slight, sickening bulge. No, I whisper, stumbling backward again, shaking my head. The taste of bile rises in my throat. Pure terror grips me. I turn and flee. My shoes squeal on the polished floor. Breath rasps. Direction is irrelevant. Only distance matters now. The mirrored walls become a vertiginous blur. The thumping behind the glass resumes, a frantic percussion accompanying my flight. My ears ring, legs burn, arms pump mechanically, eyes fixed ahead, blocking out the chaos. Then, inevitably, I stumble, tripping over my own feet, crashing hard onto the floor. Knees slam against the unyielding surface, pain shooting up my legs. Palms sting from the impact. Grunting, I push myself up, wincing, the corridor momentarily spinning around me. My stomach lurches violently. Fighting down nausea, I stagger onward. Suddenly, blackness. The overhead luminescence flickers, dies, plunging the corridor into absolute dark. Just for a second, but my heart seizes. The darkness is a primal fear, amplified. When the light snaps back on, the reflections are closer, pressed hard against the glass. Their eyes seem larger, unnervingly focused. I can hear them breathing, a multitude of shallow, ragged breaths. Panic claws at the edges of my sanity. I squeeze my eyes shut, a desperate, futile attempt to negate the sight. Opening them reveals the same scene, but now imbued with a palpable sense of movement. Behind the glass, a stirring in the mirrored depths. Wake up now. The litany runs through my head. It's a dream, it has to be, but the pain, the exhaustion, feel utterly real. My muscles scream fatigue, my teeth chatter uncontrollably. Calm down, I command myself, then slap my own face hard, hoping the shock will break the spell. Nothing. Again, until my cheek stings fiercely. I look into the nearest mirror. My reflection mimics the action, but again, that infinitesimal, horrifying delay. Tears of frustration and fear blur my vision. I scrub them away. Then, a sharp crack. The sound resonates sharp and clear down the hall. I freeze, searching wildly for the source. Ahead, one of the mirrors bears a thin, hairline fracture running vertically down its center. The reflection within that fractured pane is smiling broadly. A second crack spiders out from the first. My pulse surges. Bile rises again. I cannot bear witness to what comes next. I turn and run. And in that instant, the world shifts violently. The corridor seems to tilt beneath me. Vertigo overwhelms. My eyes flutter, and I jolt awake, gasping upright in my own bed. Sweat-slicked sheets cling to me. My heart pounds erratically. My arms tremble. The familiar shapes of my bedroom slowly resolve in the dim moonlight filtering through the window. Distant traffic hums, a sound blessedly ordinary. I struggle to regulate my breathing, temples throbbing, wiping sweat from my brow with the back of a trembling hand. The tightness in my chest slowly begins to ease. Relief washes over me, potent and profound. I am awake. Then my gaze falls upon the full-length mirror leaning against the far wall. An ordinary mirror. Yet immediately, something feels wrong. The reflection is subtly askew. My shoulders appear broader, my head tilted at an angle I don't recognize. I swing my legs out of bed, standing on limbs still shaky from the dream chase, and approach it cautiously. I raise my right arm. The reflection mirrors the gesture, but the synchronicity is flawed. A fractional delay hangs in the air between movement and mimicry. My stomach twists into a cold knot. A faint warping seems to distort the glass near the edges, a subtle ripple. Tentatively, I reach out, pressing my palm flat against the surface. Cool, solid glass meets my touch, just as it should. But the memory of those other reflections, the ones behind the glass, is too vivid. A tingling unease prickles in my fingertips. My breathing remains shallow, my heart refusing to slow its frantic rhythm. Retreating a step, I try to steady myself, legs weak beneath me. I stare at the subtly distorted image, and it seems to stare back with a nascent awareness all its own. What now? Part of me screams to cover it, drag it from the room, shatter it. But another, morbidly fascinated part cannot look away. Those other selves, pounding, scraping, pressing against their transparent prison. Did one find a way through? Did the dream bleed into waking? A full-body tremor of dread ripples through me. I lick dry lips, tasting salt. So I stand here now, locked in a silent standoff with my own reflection, waiting, watching for it to move independently. The mirror shows only my room behind me, beds, lamp, closet door, all reassuringly mundane. Yet the posture of the figure within the glass remains subtly wrong, a twist in the spine, a set to the shoulders that isn't mine. My pulse hammers in my throat. I want to break eye contact, but cannot. Palms slick with sweat, breath still unsteady. I flick the bedside lamp switch. Harsh yellow light floods the room, chasing shadows, but the aberration in the mirror persists. The subtle warp, the fractional lag, they remain. Uncertain, I step back and sink onto the edge of my bed. The mattress groans softly. I rub my eyes fiercely, but reopening them reveals the same disquieting image. The dream clings, its residue staining reality. My body aches with phantom exertion, as if I truly ran those impossible miles. How do I confront this? For now, paralysis holds me. I can only stare, hoping desperately it's a trick of exhaustion, praying it doesn't worsen. A dull ache settles deep in my gut. I realize I've been holding my breath and force a shaky exhale. Adrenaline still courses through me, leaving me trembling. It's not just in my head. Something is fundamentally wrong with the mirror. How? Why? These questions are unanswerable. It is simply different, changed. My reflection's eyes seem darker, deeper, just as they were in the endless hall. Silence stretches, thick and heavy. I watch. The distortion holds. The thought of moving the mirror, covering it, surfaces again, but fatigue and a paralyzing fear keep me rooted to the spot. So I sit, waiting for my racing heart to quiet, wondering with chilling certainty if I will see it blink when my own eyes are wide open. Now, every glance towards that glass summons the same suffocating dread I knew in the corridor. The dream hasn't ended, it has merely changed venue. How do I escape this? Sweat prickles my skin anew. Breathing remains a conscious effort. My mouth is parchment dry, heart a frantic prisoner in my ribs. I listen intently for the slightest sound, watch for the barest flicker of independent movement from the figure in the glass. The quiet is immense, terrifying. The conviction hardens. The dream followed me home. Eventually, I lie back on the bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, darting nervously towards the mirror every few seconds. My muscles remain coiled, tense. Sleep beckons, eyelids heavy, but I fight it off, terrified of returning to that place, terrified of what might happen if I close my eyes. What if the reflections find their way out while I sleep? So I remain awake, vigilant, staring at that subtly warped image trapped in the glass, a knot of sickness tightening in my stomach, skin clammy with cold sweat, trying desperately not to drift off. Caught here, suspended between nightmare and reality, unsure which side of the looking glass is truly home anymore. A groan from the cabin's aged timbers resonated not just in the floorboards, but deep within Alara, a visceral echo of her solitude in this forested haven, or what she'd believed was solitude. With the sun bleeding its last light below the jagged silhouette of the pines, painting the clearing in strokes of elongated shadow, a flicker at the woodline snagged her gaze. In that suspended heartbeat, the sanctuary warped, its promise of peace curdling into the icy premonition of a nightmare. Months she had yearned for this reprieve. The city's relentless clamor, its ceaseless friction, the soul-grinding demands of her profession, a weight threatening to crush her. Discovering the listing for this isolated dwelling felt like unearthing a hidden spring. No signal bars, no digital tethers, only the raw communion of self and wilderness. The initial 48 hours unfurled like a dream. She traversed moss-carpeted trails, lost herself in novels beside the hearth's gentle crackle, and surrendered to sleep more profound than any she'd known in years. Silence, once a void, became a restorative presence, punctuated solely by the susurrus of leaves and the flute-like calls of unseen birds. But the third evening brought a dissonance. Perched on the cabin's narrow porch, a glass of deep red swirling in her hand, Ilara watched the sky ignite in a final, defiant blaze of orange and violet. As true dark began to pool in the hollows, the familiar woods seemed to draw closer, their shadows deepening, acquiring an unnerving sentience. It was then she saw it, that brief, furtive motion amongst the trees. A deer, perhaps? Wishful thinking. It reappeared, starker this time against the gloaming. Too substantial for any four-legged creature, its passage too deliberate, too observant. Her pulse leaped, a frantic bird against her ribs. The wine glass found the rough-hewn railing, forgotten. How utterly exposed she felt, bathed in the porch light's small circle. Slowly she rose, muscles tightening, eyes straining into the encroaching blackness. Hello? The word emerged thin, fragile against the immense quiet. Is anyone there? Only silence answered, yet it was a different quality of silence now. Taut, expectant. She pivoted toward the cabin door, a primal urge screaming for sanctuary, for the solid reassurance of lock and bolt. Her fingers brushed the cool metal of the knob, just as the sharp snap of a twig shattered the stillness. Her head whipped around. There, poised at the clearing's edge, stood a silhouette. Even dimmed by distance and fading light, the form resolved into that of a man, tall, wide across the shoulders, his face an indistinct smudge within the shadows. He remained utterly immobile, a statue carved from night watching her. Fear, cold and paralyzing, turned her limbs to stone. An eternity seemed to pass in that frozen tableau, the hunter and the hunted locked in a silent acknowledgement. Then he shifted, taking a single, unhurried step forward. The spell shattered. Ilara scrambled inside, the heavy door slamming shut with a resonant thud. Her fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, fumbled with the deadbolt, then secured the chain, a flimsy piece of metal that felt laughably inadequate. Go away, Her voice, projected through the solid wood, trembled despite her effort to inject steel into it. "I've called the police." A desperate fiction, the digital void surrounding the cabin rendered it impossible. She was adrift, utterly alone. Retreating from the door, her thoughts spun wildly. Why was he here? A lost hiker strayed far from any marked trail, or something infinitely more predatory? A soft thump against the cabin's flank made her flinch violently. Another followed, further along the wall. He was circling, testing, like a wolf assessing the strength of the pen. She fled to the kitchen, her hand closing around the cold, reassuring weight of the largest butcher knife in the block. It felt pitifully small against the vastness of her fear, yet it was something. The cabin, once a cozy refuge, now seemed fragile, claustrophobic. Each window became a potential breach, every shadow a lurking threat. She moved with frantic stealth, checking locks again, yanking curtains closed against the peering darkness. Passing the living room window, she recoiled with a choked scream, stumbling backward, the knife nearly slipping from her grasp. A face, monstrously close, pressed against the glass. Features swam into focus, a tangled beard, eyes that held a disturbing, feverish gleam in the reflected porch light. His mouth stretched into a grotesque caricature of a smile, a sight that sent ice water sluicing through her veins. "Let me in," his voice came, distorted by the pain. "Cold out here." Ilara shook her head, a frantic, silent refusal, backing further into the room's relative safety. "Leave me alone," she cried out. "There's nothing here you want." A low chuckle, devoid of warmth or humor, answered her. "Oh, but there is," he countered, his voice laced with a chilling intimacy. "Warmth, company. I've been so very alone." The implication hung heavy in the air, more terrifying than any overt threat. This wasn't about theft. This was elemental, terrifying. She retreated to the final bastion, the bedroom, slamming and locking the door. Her mind raced, desperately seeking purchase, a strategy, any plan at all. The cabin felt sturdy, but determination could splinter wood, shatter glass. How long could it hold? Her gaze swept the room, frantic for a weapon, anything. The bedside lamp, heavy, carved from a solid block of maple. It would have to suffice. Wrenching the plug from the wall, she hefted its weight in her left hand, the knife still clutched tightly in her right. Armed thus, she waited, every nerve stretched taut, listening for the inevitable sound of violation. Time dissolved into an agonizing crawl. Sporadic noises from outside punctuated the suffocating silence, the crunch of boots on gravel, the protesting creak of the porch steps. Each sound jolted her, resetting the frantic rhythm of her heart. Exhaustion began its insidious creep. Her arms burned from the sustained tension of holding her meager arsenal, yet dropping them felt unthinkable. The initial surge of adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind a nauseating tremor. Just as the strain threatened to buckle her resolve, a new sound ripped through the night, the unmistakable jagged music of shattering glass. He was inside. Her grip tightened on the lamp and knife. She flattened herself against the wall beside the bedroom door, positioning herself in the blind spot. Footsteps echoed through the small cabin, unhurried, almost casual. Come out, little mouse," he crooned, the playful tone making her skin crawl. "I promise, it won't hurt, not much." Hot tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back with furious resolve. Weakness was a luxury she could not afford. Not now. The footsteps drew nearer. Floorboards groaned just outside her door. "I know you're in there," he murmured, his voice chillingly close. "Don't make this difficult." The doorknob rattled violently. Ilara held her breath, muscles coiled, poised to spring. Then, with a sickening crack of splintering wood, the door imploded inward. He stood framed in the ruined doorway, a crowbar held loosely in one hand, his silhouette stark against the dim light from the other room. Time seemed to stutter. She saw the flicker of surprise in his eyes as he registered her position right beside the threshold. She saw his arm begin to lift the crowbar. She gave him no chance to complete the motion. With a raw cry born of terror and fury, Ilara swung the heavy lamp base with every ounce of strength she possessed. It connected with his skull with a sickening, wet thud. He staggered, a grunt escaping him, stunned but not felled. Without pausing, she launched herself forward, driving her shoulder hard into his solar plexus. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs, the knife and crowbar skittering away across the wooden planks. A desperate, flailing struggle ensued, strength against sheer primal desperation. Somehow, fueled by terror, she found herself astride him. Her hand found the lamp again. She brought it down hard onto his head, once, twice, a third time. The resistance beneath her abruptly ceased. He went limp. Scrambling off him, Ilara dragged air into her burning lungs in ragged gasps. He lay utterly still, a dark pool beginning to spread around his head. A chilling fear gripped her. Had she killed him? Then she saw the faint, rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, unconscious, alive. Relief washed over her, so potent it nearly buckled her knees. Staggering upright, she looked around wildly. He had to be secured. Finding a length of rope in a nearby closet, her trembling hands managed to bind his wrists and ankles. Then, drawing on reserves she hadn't known she possessed, she dragged his dead weight out onto the porch, lashing him securely to one of the thick wooden support posts. Only then, the immediate threat contained, did the fragile dam of her composure crumble. She sank onto the porch steps, great, racking sobs shaking her entire body as the enormity of the night crashed down upon her. Dawn arrived hesitantly, painting the eastern sky in bruised shades of pink and gold when the distant growl of an engine broke the fragile stillness. A familiar pickup truck emerged from the winding forest track, Mr. Henderson, the property manager, arriving for his routine weekly check. Ilara waved, a frantic, desperate gesture, as the truck crunched to a halt. Mr. Henderson's habitual cheerful greeting died on his lips, his expression morphing from pleasant inquiry to stunned horror as he took in the scene. Ilara, disheveled, tear-streaked, huddled on the steps, the bound, unconscious figure lashed to the porch post. The subsequent hours dissolved into a surreal montage, flashing lights of police cruisers, The whine of an ambulance siren, clipped questions, fragmented statements, the impersonal flash of cameras documenting the violation of her sanctuary. While a paramedic gently assessed her minor scrapes and bruises, a stern-faced detective approached. "You're incredibly fortunate, miss," Detective Miller stated, his voice low and grave. "This individual, we've been searching for him for several months, suspected in a string of similar assaults in remote locations like this." Ilara could only nod, numb, adrift in a sea of exhaustion and delayed shock. "You did well," the detective added, his tone softening slightly. "You survived. Ultimately, that's all that matters." As two officers led her attacker away, now conscious and shackled, his eyes met hers one final time. The feral gleam was gone, replaced by a flat, defeated rage. Ilara held his gaze, refusing to yield, refusing to look away. She had stared into the abyss of her deepest fear and had not been consumed. The sun climbed higher, bathing the clearing in a deceptively peaceful light as she prepared to depart the cabin forever. Tossing her overnight bag into the back of the Wayton's police cruiser that would convey her back toward civilization, she cast one final glance at the rustic structure, the tranquil woods that had promised escape. The peace was irrevocably fractured, the illusion of safety stripped bare. Yet as she settled into the passenger seat, a core of unexpected resilience solidified within her. She had unearthed a strength she never knew she possessed. The wilderness had harbored danger, but it had not broken her. Whatever awaited her now, she knew, with a certainty born of trauma and survival, that she could face it. She had confronted the darkness and emerged, scarred perhaps, but undefeated. As the cruiser pulled away, the cabin receding into the trees, Ilara closed her eyes, releasing a long, shuddering breath. The nightmare was concluded. It was time to return home.